and welcome. Welcome to fall, which arrived this week, right? And we had a couple beautiful days. Welcome to the Jewish New Year, as tonight marks the beginning of Rosh Hashanah. And welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Chester River, where our mission is to inspire, support, and inform all who seek spiritual growth and a more equal and just community. No matter who you are, no matter where you are on your spiritual or life journey, please know that you are welcome here, in person or virtually. I'm Nancy Holland, your service leader this morning, joined by the staff and volunteers as noted in your order of service, who make this morning possible. I'm also very pleased this morning to welcome Reverend Karen Bergman-Marsh to our pulpit, returning to our pulpit, actually, right. Reverend Karen serves as chaplain at John Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore and as the affiliate community minister of the Towson UUCR. She's a graduate of the Star King School for the Ministry as of May 2020. And prior to answering her call to ministry, Reverend Marsh was an active lay leader at Towson and also worked as an environmental scientist and an environmental attorney. So you obviously bring a wealth of background, and we welcome you and look forward to your words this morning. I think, as many of you know, as it says on our order of service, celebrating 30 years. Well, as of Tuesday, the 27th, the UUs of the Chester River will have been in existence 10,955 days. I looked up what happened on that day. You know, sometimes famous people or world events. Frankly, there was not much. I didn't recognize any of the, quote, famous people who had been born on that day in 1992. I didn't recognize the top song of the year. That may say more about me than... but I think we can easily claim then that the founding of this congregation was a major highlight of that day. And I also learned that our birthday puts us in the zodiac sign Libra. And the symbol of Libra is the scales of based on the Greek. They were held by Themis, the Greek personification of divine law and custom. I'm not much on astrologic stuff, but Librans are extroverted, cozy, and friendly people. And like the scales that symbolize the sign, Librans seek balance, harmony, peace, and justice in the world. And tonight, the 25th, it's also a full moon. And a full moon in the sign of Libra puts special emphasis on friendships and balance. And as I said, I don't practice astrologic stuff much, but it seems to me particularly fitting that this congregation had its birth in the sign of Libra, prophetic for our UU values and our focus here on inclusion, justice, harmony in the world. We have a couple of announcements this morning. Please make sure that you do check your name off on the sign-up sheet outside, just in the very unlikely event we have to contact anybody about COVID exposure. Also, the B&G Building and Grounds Subcommittee is exploring the possibility of a pathway leading from the parking lot to our memorial garden. That's been laid out with a couple of hoses where it might run, and we're still getting preliminary bids on that. And also the 30th birthday, remember next Sunday we'll be celebrating that with a potluck following the service. There is a sign-up sheet, a separate sign-up sheet in the lobby to say if you're coming and what you'd like to bring to share. And some of you may know that our heating system went out this week. Luckily it was pretty mild. But we're also getting estimates, Jim Lavin, on having that replaced as soon as possible. Now, if you will join, Karen will light the challenge. Join me with the words that are in your order of service. They're new this week. A chalice lit in our midst is a symbol of our liberal faith, a faith built on the foundations of freedom, reason, and welcome, a faith sustained by acts of kindness and justice, a faith that envisions a world flourishing with equality for all people, a faith that demands the living out of goodness, a faith that requires thoughtfulness, a faith of wholeness. This tiny flame is the symbol of the spark of all this within each of us.
We will now be singing our opening hymn, number 113, Where is Our Holy Church? And Al will play the melody through once, and then we'll begin singing it. Rise as you feel comfortable.
Where is our holy church, where race and class unite, as equal persons in the search for beauty, truth, and right? Where is our holy writ, where our human heart, the sacred torch of truth has lit by inspiration taught. There is a holy one, the mighty host brings on, the sacred charge in every land to break the captive's bond. There is a holy land within the human soul, where every frame truly seen with character the goal. There is our paradise in aspiration's sight, wherein we hope to see arise 10,000 years of life.
And our opening words are number 436, if you care to read along. This is by Reverend David C. Pohl. We come to this time and this place to rediscover the wondrous gift of free religious community, to renew our faith in the holiness, goodness, and beauty of life, to reaffirm the way of the open mind and full heart, to rekindle the flame of memory and hope, and to reclaim the vision of an earth made fair with all of her people one.
Now we'll have our period of joys and concerns, the time that we reserve for sharing our deepest feelings, our joys, our worries with those of us here in community. When the time comes, if you would come up and share your joy or concern, then I will light the candle. As always, our first candle is to acknowledge those impacted by COVID, which continues. And I also want us to send wishes for all those that are affected by the flooding and the storm. And we keep those in Ukraine in our hearts for refugees.
is a joy and a sorrow. My mother, Marguerite Lynette Holmes Dysart, died Thursday. She was 99 years old and had a wonderful life and was a lifelong Unitarian. Next Saturday, I'm going to go up to Pennsylvania and we're going to bury my older brother who died in August of 2020. We hadn't had a chance to get together since COVID, so it would be exposure to do that. I was looking forward to seeing my younger brother and his wife. They live in Florida, who I've lived since early 2020. And he's coming, but their cat bit Moira on the hand. And cat bites are affected 90% of the time, so she's on a 14-day treatment of infusions. She's doing better, but we'll miss her.
I have joy or a concern. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but so I'm going through a lot of changes at work, and I expressed that to my boss, and then I had some people recruiting me from elsewhere, and then my boss said, "We don't want you to go, please stay." So I don't really know what to do just yet. You know, I'm going to kind of listen it out, kind of figure out what's best. But I do want to keep working, so that's a joy, I think. And then the other thing is, I was so prepared for RE today, and there are no kids, so maybe next week.
I have an unusual joy. We went to my wife's 66th high school reunion in Salisbury yesterday, and they had a reunion fund. They decided this was the last one ever, so they gave the rest away to charity. But they're calling themselves out. But there's a lady across from me who lives in Oxford, and she said, well, she went to Unitarian church once, and it wasn't what she expected. So then she went on to have some rather stringent ideas of religion, and thank goodness that's not us. That we acknowledge that there's a broad spectrum of faith and ideas, and that we get down to the basics of humanism. So going for us.
I have a joy. My oldest grandchild, Isabella, who graduated from college this year, starts her first real job tomorrow. And she is excited and petrified. But I know she'll. Well, for all those joys and sorrows that have been shared and those that we may still hold in our hearts, may we take a moment of silence. Blessed be. I'd like to share a reading suggested by Reverend Karen, writing from James Luther Adams, who was a Unitarian parish priest, minister, a Harvard Divinity School professor for 40 years, and is considered one of the more famous and influential 20th century liberal theologians. And this is an excerpt from his writing called A Faith for the Free. Faith is by no means dead in the world. A devil's plenty of it is loose on the planet. A person bears beliefs, says Emerson, as a tree bears apples. A person bears beliefs about themselves, about their fellows, about their work and their play, about their past, about their future, about human destiny. What a person loves, what a person serves, what a person sacrifices for, what a person tolerates, what a person fights against. These signify their faith. They show what they place their confidence in. The question concerning faith is not, shall I be a person of faith? The proper question is rather, which faith is mine? Or better, which faith should be mine? The fact that every person must put trust in something is no basis for any particular faith. Rather, the necessity as well as the fact shows only that we humans must choose. We cannot hide behind someone else's authority or choice. Whenever we delegate a decision to someone else, we have made a decision. The decision is still ours, and the claim that humility dictates the decision does not make the decision any the less our own. We cannot escape from freedom and its responsibilities. Just because we are compelled to make a decision and a choice, we are compelled to have faith in ourselves. The free person's faith is not merely a faith in oneself. It is a faith in the capacity of sincere persons to find freely together that which is worthy of confidence. The free person is not bound to accept a faith once delivered. Their views, consensus, not compulsion, free and open discussion, not docile obedience, should rule in matters of faith. The free person does not live by an unexamined faith. To do so is to worship an idol whittled out and made into a fetish. The true can be separated from the false only through observation and rational discussion. The faith that cannot be discussed is a form of tyranny. An unexamined faith is not worth living, for it can be true only by accident. A faith worth having is faith worth discussing and testing. To believe that a fence of taboo should be built around some formulation is to believe that a person can become God and speak for them. The faith of the free must be available to all, testable by all, valid for all.
Thank you so much, Nancy. That wonderful reading. So James Luther Adams is my go-to theologian ever since seminary, and reading him for the first time, really reading him. A number of his writings are actually in those gray hymnals of yours. He has been my man. Recently, I read an article in either the New York Times or the Atlantic, those liberal publications, that spoke of the widening divide between liberals and conservatives here in the United States. Now, the article said that conservatives think that all liberals are communists and criminals. Communists and criminals. Well, that comment didn't shock me. Ever since the former Soviet Union fell in the late 1980s, it seems conservatives here in the US have been looking for their new arch enemy. And Newt Gingrich, Republican Speaker of the House back in 1994, found the ideal arch enemy in the Democrats, namely those liberal and progressive Democrats. Unfortunately, his demand that all Republicans in the House refuse to socialize with Democratic colleagues planted the seeds of the enmity that we are witnessing today. And the identity of liberal, in quotes, has lost its historical meaning. Now it's an insult, isn't it? A curse, a four-letter word. To say that one is a liberal, at least among certain circles, is to say that that person is evil. Liberal, like any label, is a judgment. But liberal has not always meant evil or criminal or communist. The word comes from the Latin word libertas, which means freedom. Up until recently, the word liberal meant free thinking, which is kind of ironic given that conservatives these days are claiming that liberals want to suppress individual freedom, including free thought. Historically, liberalism was all about questioning the status quo. Back at the founding of the United States and the ratification of the Constitution in 1787, which is, by the way, over 60 years before Karl Marx wrote his Communist Manifesto along with Friedrich Engels. Before all that, our founders considered themselves to be liberals. It was a compliment. It was a badge of honor because they were men of the Enlightenment. And yes, I'm using the word men very intentionally. The Enlightenment was what? A liberal philosophical movement of which the philosopher John Locke was one of its leaders. It was John Locke who posited the notion that governments derive their power from those who are governed and not from some supernatural being. It was Locke who said that government only remains legitimate as long as the governed consent to it. It was Locke who said that church and state, not Jefferson, it was Locke that said that church and state must be separate and that every person has freedom of conscience. Freedom of conscience, by the way, is one of our principles, right? It's on the back of your programs. And that this freedom of conscience must be protected from government action. It was on the basis of Locke's liberal philosophy that the United States was founded, not, as modern Christian nationalists claim, upon Christianity. If Christianity played any part in the founding of American democracy, it was liberal Christianity, not the fundamentalist Christianity espoused by nationalists today. To be clear, there was and still is a liberal Christianity. Now, when I say liberal Christianity, I'm referring to a modernizing movement within Christianity that began all the way back in the Protestant Reformation in the 16th century. Liberal Christianity has emphasized and still emphasizes reason. That's a big part of us, right? And experience over doctrinal or ecclesiastical authority. And both Unitarianism and Universalism came out of that liberal Christianity. We cannot deny our roots in liberal Christianity. As Henry Whitney Bellows, who was a 19th century Unitarian minister and founder of the newsletter, The Liberal Christian, said, quote, "Unitarians are the Protestants of the Protestants," unquote. Now, both denominations were liberal because they dared to question the status quo of their times. They questioned the doctrines of Christianity that did not square with their reason and their experience. And with the growing understanding of our physical world through science, for example, the Unitarians questioned the nature of Jesus and the triune God. And the Universalists questioned the concept of predestination, which was promoted by John Calvin, who was a Protestant reformer. Now, both denominations chose to interpret the Bible differently from the traditional or the Orthodox Christianity of their time. And thus they were branded, guess what? Heretics. Which incidentally comes from the Greek word meaning to choose, which Reverend Adams spoke about in our reading, didn't he? We all have a choice. We all have freedom of choice. Now, true, those who have more status in society may have more choices. You know, some are freer than others. But we all have from birth the freedom to choose what to believe, what to put our confidence in, and what to think. Unitarian and Universalists were and continue to be heretics, free thinkers, liberals in the original sense of the term. Now, the Reverend James Luther Adams was an influential 20th century Unitarian minister who proudly bore the label heretic and liberal. Now, he was faculty member of Harvard Divinity School, along with the liberal Christian theologian Paul Tillich in the 1950s. And his essay of Faith for the Free, from which you heard today, is one of the many essays and sermons on faith and freedom that he gave. Now, there's so much I can say about this seminal essay, which, although written in 1946, remains very relevant today. And I encourage you to look it up if you can find it. If not, I'll send you a copy of the whole thing. But its main point is the importance of discourse in matters of faith. Faith, for Reverend Adams, is a very broad concept. Though many people associate faith with belief in a deity or deities, faith encompasses much, much more. To Reverend Adams, faith is what a person puts their confidence in. And God, or religion, is, quote, the thing that most deeply concerns a person, unquote. Like another Unitarian, Ralph Waldo Emerson, y'all have heard of him, I'm sure, Reverend Adams notes that everyone has a faith. Each one of you has a faith. In other words, we all have certain beliefs about ourselves and the world, our past and our future. Don't you? So in today's parlance, these might be called our personal truths. Never heard that phrase, my personal truth, right? Yet Reverend Adams would not condone the acceptance of a personal truth without examination. To Adams, quote, an unexamined faith is not worth having, for it can only be true only by accident. A faith worth having is faith worth discussing and testing, unquote. There's the scientific mind, isn't it? Indeed, as you heard in the reading, quote, the free person does not live by an unexamined faith. To do so is to worship an idol, whittled out and made into a fetish, unquote. Powerful words back in 1946 at the end of World War II, and powerful words today. That passage reminds me of the gun rights activists, right? They put their faith in guns and in dominance. So for this reason, Reverend Adams emphasized the importance of religious community, or the free church, as he put it, in matters of faith. To Reverend Adams, quote, "The free person's faith is not merely a faith in oneself. It is a faith in the capacity of sincere persons to find together that which is worthy of confidence." In other words, people must sincerely work with each other in order to give reliable form and expression to faith. This is the only way freedom from tyranny can be fulfilled. Unquote. The Reverend James Luther Adams. He's saying that a liberal faith community provides that reality check, isn't he? It's a counterbalance to the distortions that can result from an individual's isolation from what Reverend Adams calls a commanding, transforming reality. A commanding, transforming reality. That individual isolation is so easily accomplished these days, isn't it? With all the social media. It provides a strong temptation to retreat to our little bubbles of alternate reality, filled with all the alternate facts that we hear about. Do I need to say that this division is an existential threat to not only democracy, but to peace, true justice, and to freedom? As the Reverend Susan Frederick Gray, who is the current president of the Unitarian Universalist Association, said, quote, "This is no time for a casual faith, no time to go it alone," unquote. That's why it's so critically important that we join liberal religious communities, such as this one right here. Joining with other liberals in a faith community can be that powerful counterbalance, not only to the centrifugal forces of individualism, but also to authoritarianism, whether it's wrapped in a flag or carrying a cross. Liberal, that is free thinking congregations, provide a space to explore together that which is worthy of our confidence and that commanding, transforming reality. It is in a liberal religious community that we can model self-governance, and a different way to relate to one another that isn't based upon hierarchies and dominance. James Luther Adams spoke of this idea of the free church as a means of creating a community of justice and love. Now, in such a community, we will meet up with differences, won't we? But we shouldn't fear diversity. Diversity is not the opposite of unity. Rather, the opposite of diversity is uniformity. And that is what conservatives are trying to push, uniformity. Now, speaking as a geologist, which I was, I would even say that the arc of all life bends towards diversity, not uniformity. Uniformity in the natural world is death. It is death, literally death. And I would argue that is the same for us. So actually, if we're talking in theological terms, uniformity is an abomination and the direct opposite of what I call Gaia's will, or what my Christian siblings would call God's will. It's not only possible to have unity in diversity, that is our natural state. The challenge in any community then is, how do we negotiate power in relationships among diverse and free people? Such negotiation of power among individuals and groups for the purpose of making decisions is the textbook definition of politics. Look it up in Webster's dictionary. That's the textbook definition of politics. But like liberal, politics is not a four-letter word. We've been made to think that because of this toxic and negative rhetoric of our leaders over the decades. And that may be intentional, by the way. It discourages us, the people, from engaging in the political process, which includes not only voting, but also discussing matters that are of ultimate concern to us. The truth is, humans are social animals. And I don't use animals in a pejorative sense, but in a factual sense. We are wired to live together. Even introverts need other people. So that means that wherever two or more people are gathered, there are politics. That's the bad news and the good news. However, a liberal congregation or a free church, in the words of Reverend Adams, can be a place where we practice true democracy, where we model unity in diversity. From there, we can show the world what real democracy looks like and how we can live together in peace while respecting difference, which means learning, listening, and dialectic skills. A liberal church is a place where self-determination is welcome and critical thinking skills are encouraged. In a liberal congregation, people are allowed to define themselves. That's self-determination. And we can start right here and now by reclaiming the term liberal. When people try to define you as a communist or a criminal, gently remind them with a kind smile that liberal is not a four-letter word. Count it, it's 7. And the founders of this country, for all their flaws, were liberals, which is to say they were free thinkers, just like every single one of you. I know you're all free thinkers because you're here. So wear that badge of liberal proudly, because a free society can't exist without free thinking people, liberals. A free society can't exist without you. So in support of that free society, of this liberal church community, I invite you now, while Al plays America the Beautiful for us, to give your gifts to support this congregation and all of its good work in this community and the world. Thank you, Al, for your beautiful music.
And may I say, for these gifts freely given, we are grateful, for we are now the keepers of the flame.
Thank you. Our closing words come from Laura Lynn Bellamy, number 692 in your hymnal, if you care to read along. If here you have found freedom, take it with you into the world. If you have found comfort, go and share it with others. If you have dreamed dreams, help one another that they may all come true. If you have known love, give some back to a bruised and hurting world. Go in peace. And now, as our closing hymn, I invite you to rise as you are able in body or spirit to sing number 287, Faith of the Larger Liberty, in your gray hymnals.
Faith of larger liberty, source of light expanding. All the church that is to be, all bonded withstanding. Faith of the free, by thee we live. Thy givest and shall give royalty commanding. Heroes of faith in every age, foreseeing love denying, wrought and increasing heritage, monarchy defying. Faith of the free, in mighty name, the cozy heritage we claim, their living and their dying. Faith for the people everywhere, whatever their oppression, oh, make the world more fair, living faith's confession. Faith of the free, whatever plight, thy Lord liberty, be thy light, be your blessed possession.
And now join me as we extinguish the chalice. The words, I think, are in your order. We extinguish this flame, not the light of truth, the warmth of community, the fire
Of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again.
Lifted up, lawless your way. Starlight, starlight, guide your journey into
Following the postlude, please join us in the lobby for coffee and conversation.
Ranch wagon, famous for the long dog. Oh, excuse me. Sure if I'm muted. Not sure if I'm muted or if I am muted.
Have a wonderful week.